Welcome to another episode of The Consultants, your personal and professional advisors to everything Star Citizen. My name's Dussell, you can just call me Duss, and today I'll be taking you through everything you want to know about patch 3.21.1. Also cover 3.21.0 because I didn't release anything for that, so why not? This series highlights the things that you can do, should do, and maybe you should avoid in Star Citizen as of the current live patch. 3.21.1 is the IAE patch, so there are some surprises. At the end of this patch cycle, once IAE completes, I'll go ahead and update and provide some additional background if anything really changes. Alright, so let's go ahead and run through the, as of right now, current live patch 3.21.0. To start off, the A1 Spirit is now in the game, which is great. It's a downsized A2 capable of deploying up to 10 size 5 gravity bombs. Comparatively, it's basically like a Cutlass Black or Freelancer in size and capabilities. At the moment, its shield's quad shield. That's not correct. It should be a size 2 shield, which is split in half. So the shields are actually pretty weak on it at the moment. Fast forward a little bit. Looks like it's been fixed, we'll see, but that's not in 3.21.0 right now. Additionally, its actual capacitors are somewhat undersized, and it seems to be a mistake because it's only the weapon capacitors, and they're the only ones that are significantly smaller than all the other capacitors, so that also looks like it's a bug. We also have the Drake Cutter Scout coming into the game, so it's basically your exploration ship. In this case, it's labeled a Scout. There's been rumors that there will also be some kind of expedition version. If there is, the biggest difference will generally come down to the expedition having more fuel and cargo space, whereas the scouts tend to have upgraded scanning suites. So in the case of the cutter, that might actually be the differences here between these two versions. Additionally, Crusader platforms have been added to the game. These are just locations around Crusader that you can just jump to. The collection of platforms, think like Orison, right, or Siege of Orison if you've played that. They have locations, they have markers, there's missions associated with them, and you can jump to them from the star map, so they're pretty cool. Check them out. There's new UGF missions called consignment missions. In these missions, you're going to be assigned a underground facility, a UGF, to go to. You'll go there, you'll kill some bad guys, you'll search some good guys, you'll find a data pad, and on that data pad will be a code. You put that into a machine, it starts spitting out the stuff that you need, and you get that box, you go on your way and deliver it. So it's a pretty cool mission. Definitely one of a kind. There's just waves of enemies that keep coming at you. So it's a good way to get like equipment and stuff like that. Additionally, there's a new Korea mission to steal evidence. I actually don't really know much about this one personally. I haven't tried it, but it is the unlawful kind of new mission addition to try and check out. So if that's your jam, go ahead and check it out. I assume it probably pops up when you're around Korea, so that'd be probably where I would start. Also in 3.21.0, the ground vehicles have had a physics update. Per the developers, what was said is that all vehicles have been tweaked with the intent of making throttle control easier and suspension tweaks, whatever that means. Personally, I kind of found the throttle tweaks to be a negative. Ships aren't responsive like they used to be, or I should say ground vehicles aren't as responsive as they used to feel. It might feel better on a keyboard mouse. Personally, I tried both keyboard mouse and sticks and neither felt particularly great. There's kind of like this delay now between when you hit W on the keyboard and the vehicle goes. It makes it very difficult to control. Overall, doesn't feel great. And seemingly because of this throttle control change, the Nova tank is now struggling to get up the ramps of the Hercules ships. So make sure you hit full speed before you go to the ramp, because there's kind of like this longer delay than there used to be. And the tanks actually always struggled to get up the ramps in the first place. So you basically have to make sure you're going straight only, hold W only. If you hit left or right at all, you'll actually lose speed. So you need to make sure you're going up the ramp fully centered to begin with. Some other more minor changes on the list. Zoom's been added to remote turrets, which is kind of neat. Including ground vehicles. So if you're in a turret, you press or hold Z, you'll go to a 2x zoom, a 4x zoom, then cycle back to no zoom. Another turret enhancement, but this time for vehicles only, is that now ground vehicles have access to the gyro mode. If you're not familiar with that, it's basically a mode that your turret will always stay in the same position, even if your driver is doing other things. So from the perspective of ground vehicles, this is actually really great. This is a big quality of life update because they'll be able to actually be used in motion now. That should include the tank's turret, which was actually notably very difficult to fire because it's, as the driver is driving, right, it's bouncing, and it makes it hard to land any hits. So this eliminates that, allows your turret to sit steady while the rest of the vehicle moves. That's everything we had in 3.21.0. There might have been some more smaller additions that I didn't capture here. Let me know if that's the case down below in the comments. So let's move on to 3.21.1. The big thing to announce about it is that this is the IAE patch, and if this is your first IAE at Star Citizen, it's kind of a big deal. It's a lot of fun. From November 17th to November 30th, there's going to be this convention. This year it's at New Babbage, so you can set your home to New Babbage. You won't have to go anywhere. You can just spawn there because, you know, Microtech is kind of far from every other planet. Generally, that's what people do for the IAE patch. They'll set their home there so that they can just run in every day and check it out. But from November 17th to the 30th is a free fly, so if you have friends you want to bring in, this is the time to do it. Because of that, the servers are absolutely slammed and don't perform particularly well, but generally it doesn't keep players from playing. But what will happen is every day, a new manufacturer will take a showroom floor. There's usually 2 floors. A manufacturer A will be on floor A. Manufacturer B, the next day, will show up on the next floor. And then the third day, manufacturer A leaves and a new manufacturer comes in. This year it looks to be hosted by Gatak, which is an alien manufacturer. They're focused on industry. In fact, they have the exclusive license to make industrial ships for their race. So there's a lot of thought that this year we're going to see industrial focused ships, which if you follow leaks, you probably know exactly what I'm talking about. But IAE is definitely worth checking out. It'll also include a YouTube video series updates from Jax McCleary every single day. This is a lot of people's highlights. If you like Top Gear, it's basically Jeremy Clarkson from Top Gear taking you through spaceships. If you haven't seen previous years, go back and watch them all. Do yourself a favor. It is a saga. So every year there's an update that builds on the previous year, and it's really worthwhile. I mean, there's nothing else to say about that. It's awesome. Check it out. Other thing worth mentioning is that during this time, IAE every year, all ships are available to purchase. The very expensive ships will still be hull limited, so you'll have to have an F5 battle with other players, attempt to get them. That's like the Idris, the Javelin, the 890 Jump. That's your opportunity to buy these ships with real money if that's what you're looking to do. Also, this is the time to collect a bunch of CCUs or cross-chassis upgrades. If you're familiar with it, if you're not, there's tons of YouTube channels that have already put out kind of details on how to do this, but basically by upgrading your ship slowly and taking advantage of the discounts that happen throughout this event, you can get a ship for hundreds of dollars cheaper than what it would be to just outright buy it. Definitely suggest if you're going to spend any significant amount of money in the game at all, like $100 or more, check these out because you're going to save a lot of money generally. The best in show winners this year are the Redeemer, the 600i, the Vulture, and the Corsair. So anyone that owns those ships by the end of IAE, it doesn't distribute till after IAE is over. It's really important. But when you have those ships in your hangar, you'll be awarded the unique IAE Best in Show winner skins. This year, they're a pearlescent purple and cyan. They look really great, very shiny, especially if you like that kind of beetle aesthetic. It looks super cool. That won't be the only way to get it. At the end of the show, these ships, the same ones I just listed, the Redeemer, 600i, Vulture, and Corsair, they'll have unique IAE packages that bundle those paints in with them. And my recommendation is not to go that route because they're bundled with that ship. If you ever decide to melt that ship, you lose it. It's much better to have these things in your hangar before the rewards get distributed, because that way you'll be able to actually get the rewards assigned to your hangar instead, so you can freely melt that ship if you choose to later. So beyond IAE, what is there in this patch? Big thing is the C1 Spirit is going to be included. They did upgrade the cargo, as I'm sure many of you are aware of at this point. It's got 64 SCU. I think originally it was slated to have 46 or somewhere around there. It's got a dedicated S2 tractor beam, not S3 as stated in a previous ISC. Its turret is size 3, but its tractor beam size 2, so it doesn't actually compete with the SRV. We've been able to lift like around a Vanguard-sized ship, so it's very significant. We know for a fact that S2 will be able to carry up to a 32 SCU cargo container. I was able to test and verify that as well. Good news in that regard, of course, because it can carry 2 32 SCU containers, which is kind of its design intent. It handles better compared to the Spirit A1. It seems like they've resolved the shield issues, they've resolved the capacitor issues, so it looks like it's functioning as intended compared to the A1. So as long as these updates get pushed to the A1, that should also be fixed as of 3.21.1. We also are getting the SRV, the tow truck of Star Citizen. There's really not a lot of gameplay around this ship. You know, you can't really repair ships at the moment. You can repair the hulls, but that's about it. In the future, it's going to be the way to get your ships around when they break down. So if your power generator goes out, you're not going to want to lose that ship. You're going to want to retain it. So you'll get an SRV to tow you to the local station to get it repaired. It is able to tow ships in quantum, which is a pretty nifty feature if you ask me. And overall, I mean, it's a simple ship. It's got the Argo aesthetic. It's got some living room space inside of it. It's honestly, it's a pretty cool ship. It's worth checking out if you haven't seen it. Not one I'd recommend to pledge for, meaning buy with real money, but definitely worthwhile to buy in game and at a future time. There's really no rush to pick this up. It's a very niche ship. You're not going to be using it every day, so, you know, kind of take that in stride. And if you haven't picked up yet, vehicle tractor beams are in game. Not just vehicle tractor beams, the larger handheld, fully dedicated tractor beam, as well as the ability to have multiple tractor beams converge, pick up an object, and move it that is heavier than what they were intended for. Tractor beam gameplay's in. That means that you should basically always have a handheld tractor beam. Once this patch drops, go to your local, I think it's in the cargo stations or the refining stations, I forget which, but go buy one and make sure you have one on your ship, or if you're driving a ground vehicle, like say the PTV, that's a popular, or STV, everybody's favorite Steve, or Cyclone, put one in the gun holster. What that'll let you do is if you happen to get the ship wedged somewhere that it shouldn't be, you can just pick up that vehicle, move it a little bit, put it back on the ground, and move on with life, no problem. So, the first stage of being able to start manipulate the world around you. The C1 is able to lift a lot, like I mentioned earlier, up to a Vanguard so far, and it might be able to lift some heavier stuff as well. As long as the ship is off and it's a ship you own, there's no issues. Now, if it's somebody else's ship that's off, and you don't own it, right? If they're not in your party, you will get a crime stat if you attempt to move their ship without their permission, meaning you have to join the party. That's a newer update that they added in. I think it's a good change, but you do have to be aware of that. So if you're with a bunch of friends, just always make sure you're in a party. Like anytime you're with friends in general in Star Citizen, make sure you're partied up, because there are a lot of permission-based things based on party that you can't necessarily see at this point. Along the lines of legality in ships, we also have ship trespassing. People in your party right now, they announce themselves when they enter a ship, meaning as soon as they're in your ship, they join the comms, and everybody in that ship knows that person has joined, whether you're in a party or not. Now, that's not the case in 3.21.1. In fact, a stranger walks on your ship, you'll never know unless you happen to find them. That has really big implications, because obviously then a player can now hide on your ship. Well, also, if they're not in a party and they're on your ship, you're now allowed to just kill them outright. And from what I've seen so far, many ships have now been able to lock the actual pilot seat. So the doors to the pilot seat can be locked shut so that if there is some random person on your ship, they can't get into it, which I think is actually a great little touch. I really do appreciate that. So if they're on your ship and you're able to pull out a gun, you can just kill them if they're not in your party. No crime stat, nothing, no worries. It's been working great every time I've tried, and a lot of players have been trying. So all of you out there, for any of my Sea of Thieves friends out there, may the tucking begin. I think this is going to be a very fun new feature coming into the verse, and I'm actually really looking forward to this. I know I'm going to be taking advantage of it as a legal player a lot. Being able to sneak on a bounty's ship without them knowing about it is going to be great, because then I can actually prevent them from just jumping away by physically being there. There's a new mission called Data Heist. I did not get to try this. It's a new unlawful mission, so I don't know where it is exactly, but basically the description from CIG says players are going to be tasked with infiltrating locations defended by NPCs, and you're going to be hacking terminals. Once you do that, there's going to be multiple servers that pop up, and they're going to start sending data to another location, and your job is to protect those servers. Apparently they can overheat as well as being destroyed. I don't know exactly what that means, but your job is to make sure that neither of those things happen and that enough data gets uploaded to satisfy the mission. As soon as enough data uploads, you'll succeed, you leave the area, you get paid. Awesome. Conversely, if too many servers are destroyed, or I guess there's a time limit because it says not enough data uploads, you'll fail the mission. So I'm guessing there's like a time limit for you to be able to upload. Maybe that time limit is related to them overheating or something. Neat mission. I can't really tell you much about it beyond that though. Also, a kind of smaller update in here. We do have the vehicle headlight refactor. I know Ben's been talking about this a lot on ISC and hinting that this has been like long desired. The general idea is that smaller ship, smaller lights, shorter range, bigger ship, bigger lights, longer range. I didn't do a ton of analysis on this, so I don't know if certain ships in a certain size have more efficacy than others. Like, I would imagine the Reclaimer would be a lot brighter than the Carrack. But I don't know, I didn't really try that. It's there, and ships are definitely consistent now amongst the same size, so at the very least, that's nice. You have that level of predictability. They're also porting over the FPS AI behavior from Squadron 42 into the PU, which is very exciting. So in 3.21.1, when you go out to an underground facility or a bunker, whatever you go to, right? Anytime you're interacting with FPS NPCs, they're gonna have that new tag and personality system that gives them different attributes on how they want to attack you or approach the situation. When I was on the more high performance servers, the ones that were getting, decently around 10 FPS, this was actually very challenging and scary and threatening, but they did not just instantly headshot you, and they didn't just immediately kill you like in an instant. So on the faster servers, they're kind of nerfed, which is great because currently they get like headshots from across the world. But on low performance servers, they're still basically potato NPCs that you can just walk up to and kill. That hasn't been fixed, obviously. I say obviously, maybe it's not obvious, but that's all related to server performance. So without better performance, those NPCs aren't going to perform better. A fan favorite that I have seen across the board that everybody's excited for is the ASOP terminal glare removal, as long as you're not using your headlamp. If you turn on your headlamp, you'll still get glare. Turn it off, But it doesn't matter whether you're in New Babbage or Area 18, those tend to be the worst ones. But those lights are gone. They're off the terminals. It's now a matte texture instead. They don't bother you whatsoever. Speaking of New Babbage, there's also a new player experience update in New Babbage. I didn't actually check to see if it included a tutorial. I'm assuming it did. There's all new signage. New Babbage is just basically revamped from the ground up. Well, I shouldn't say from the ground up. It's revamped. The signs are nicer now. The tram signs and everything. It's easier to get around if you're a new player. It's a lot easier to follow what's happening. There's a Kelto as soon as you leave the apartments, which is great. So yeah, overall, cool. There's also been something that, so I have no clue. I haven't tested this, but they listed it as UGF improvements, ledge cover and navigation improvements. They didn't really specify what that meant exactly, but I'm guessing that as you're moving through the UGFs, the underground facilities that are on planets, that maybe they're just a little bit nicer to move around. I know some of the rails you couldn't jump over, so maybe that's what they're talking about with ledge updates. And I do know that some locations had very poor cover depending on where you were in the UGF. So that might be what they're talking about in general, and they might have just made the navigation more logical. I don't know. I didn't really have time to check it out. It's in there and they've listed it, so I'm including it in this. All right, so that's all the updates from 3.21.0 and 3.21.1. Yes, that was a lot of updates to go through. I had to cover 2 patches there. As I mentioned in the beginning, if there's any updates from IAE that I need to include as well, basically any ships that are straight to flyable or any weird things that they might introduce to the game, I'll make sure to update this video or link to a new video where I include those updates. So now though, let's talk about ways to make money in 3.21.1. First, we're going to cover the longtime favorites, the things that we all know, we all love. Bunker running. It's still as good as it's ever been. It continues to pay out well. The AI performance in general is less lethal on the high performance servers, which is great because that was one of the big issues is, suddenly the AI would become ninjas when they were just walking around like potatoes and they'll just headshot you and kill you instantly. So that has been attenuated substantially. It's a lot safer to run these missions now. Eventually these missions cap out at around 60, I think might go up to 90,000 per mission. You get a lot of armor, you get decent money from it, you get unique weapons you can't get in other locations. So in general, these are very worthwhile to run. My recommendation would be to focus on the Defend Security Force style missions. They provide a lot more rep than the ones where you're trying to recover it from the bad guys. They're also the ones that don't attack you when you're in your ship, so they're a lot easier to land. You can land right at the door, you're running in, you take out the bad guys. Just don't kill the security force there or they'll blow up your ship immediately. So careful with that. Make sure you're killing a Ninetales. Whether you're doing that or anything, make sure you grab a call to arms under Mercenary. This just gives you a little bit of money for every single bad guy you kill and is just passive income. I mean, there's no reason not to grab it as soon as you log in. Grab it every single time you play. Even if you don't think you're going to run bunkers or ship bounties or whatever, it's just good to have on you. There's also a newer mission type called Public Enemy Declared Reward Offered. These are great to grab if you're on a planet that has it. They're very quick. You show up to the location, the enemy spawns, you kill them, you get 15,000 credits, you move on with life. They're not big money makers, but a lot of times they're in between locations, so you can grab it and just kind of swing off to the side real quick, kill this guy and move on with life. I don't even usually get out of my ship. I just open up the back ramp, shoot him and move on. You do have to get within range to trigger the NPC to spawn, but beyond that, it's pretty easy money usually. So if FPS combat isn't your thing, but you want to get into ship combat, bounty hunter missions are still as profitable as ever. I'm talking about ERTs. So if you know the very low risk target, medium risk target, etc., work all the way up to ERT. And that's when you'll start making some good money. Ideally, you take the Pro-Tem contract, which is where you get the ability to start running group contracts instead. Group warrant ERTs are where you're going to make all your money running these space bounties. Also, something to be really aware of is that these ships can have various cargo on them. And it's also one of the only ways to get gasping weevil eggs in the game, which is, I think it's like 120,000 AUEC per SCU. So very, very, very high profit. Even if you scan a ship, like a smaller ship like a Titan, and it happens to have a couple SCU on it, grab it. There's no reason not to. If you're looking for space combat, these are basically your only space combat missions. I'll talk about another one in a moment here, but these are your primary ones that are always available that you can run back to back to back. A lot of people like to run these in Retaliators or Corsairs, something with a lot of firepower. These, you're usually going to be running up against the Hammerhead, right? I think now they can also include Reclaimers as well as other very large ships. You do need to bring a significant amount of firepower to take them on, but they pay out to compensate. And now with the new cargo that they can drop, you can make a lot of money. Finding a Hammerhead with, say, 100 units of Gasping Weevil Eggs, you'll be very happy. So ideally, take something that can fit that cargo. So the other kind of space combat you can do are called service beacons. These will come in the flavor of critical threat beacons. You'll have to run a couple of light critical threat beacons, and it does build up almost like rep, but there's no rep associated with these. But if you don't do the earlier missions, I've almost never seen the higher missions. I have realized over time of playing, if you do these lower missions, they eventually scale up to the point where you're being attacked by hammerheads, by Idris, and they pay out a lot, like 300,000 AUEC. They're a ton of fun. You do need a ship to be able to handle it. Look at your retaliators, something with a lot of missiles, because these ships will eat your missiles. You know, a fully crewed retaliator is good. A fully crewed A2, very good. Make sure you're running 85Bs, heavy damage, right? You can also run the size 5 laser cannons instead. They won't run out of ammo, they won't do as much damage, but you'll be able to keep going for longer without having to rearm. And honestly, some ships like the Retaliator, like an NPC Retaliator, can absorb multiple A2 turrets worth of 85B ammo, which is kind of wild. These missions are a blast, they're a lot of fun, very difficult. I recommend bringing at least one friend, but just remember, the more people you bring, the less money you earn. So it's, you know, that classic CIG trade-off. I haven't checked either. I don't know if these ones can drop cargo, but as you're going, just go ahead and give them a quick scan if you haven't done that before. Press V to get your scan interface up. Make sure that you're over the little ship box and then hold click. It'll give you a big readout of the cargo manifest, tell you what's on board. If nothing shows up on the right side that says cargo, there's nothing there. That means there is nothing on that ship. Or if you approach it close, you should see some cargo boxes pop up. So if you're close to it, like say under 1,000 meters, right? If you're about to bump it, you should be seeing some AR boxes on the screen. So if you don't see that, it probably doesn't have anything, but scan it anyway, just to double check. All right, and the last thing worth mentioning here, some of you might have been doing the illegal salvage missions. Those have been nerfed into the absolute ground. Last I checked, basically cargo is just not spawning anymore. And when it does spawn, it's really not nearly what it used to be. It seems like they want players to stop doing these at this point. It lasted a few patches, can't complain. Hopefully you've made your millions and are ready to move on to the next thing that they want us to test. Now, the only non-combat thing I have on here that I'm recommending at the moment is mining, either in a prospector or in a mole, preferably solo in either, because you'll make a lot more. Mining continues to be a very strong and reliable way to make money. It doesn't beat out the illegal salvage missions, which is why you've probably heard a lot of people stop mining. But both the prospector and mole do bring in a respectable amount of AUEC per hour, and it's pretty easy now. It used to be you had to deal with quantanium, deal with blowing up. It was a big headache, but now both the prospector and mole are quite capable of taking in any of the top minerals. Selling is still obviously an issue, right? You have to go back, you have to refine it to double the value of the mineral itself, then you have to haul and sell it. So it's still a process, but it still makes you really good money per hour. And of all these activities I've listed out here, it's really the only one that scales with an infinite number of players. It doesn't matter how many people you've got in a group, as long as you have the right ratio of moles to scouts, you're gonna just keep printing money basically, and it scales great in large group activities. So if you're running an org or in an org and trying to figure out what can 20 people do to make a ton of money, well, mining. Especially because, again, that illegal salvage is gonna be gone, or mostly gone at this point. Also, those group ERT warrants are limited. So on a server, there's only so many at any point in time. However, with mining, there's literally, I mean, as many rocks as you can spawn in, basically. Go another 100 meters in any direction, you're gonna find more rocks. So with mining, it doesn't matter how many people you add in, but with the ERT bounties, there is a noticeable decline, especially once you have more than 2 groups running. They're gonna start toe-stepping on each other. That's probably everything I'd say is viable to make money in a reliable manner in 3.21.1. You might have noticed that I've left out a lot of things that you're like, hey, Dust, you can make money these ways. Well, yeah, you probably can make money, but these are the best ways, and they've continued to be the best ways because they're either easy or approachable, easy to remember, reliable, or not really prone to a bunch of nasty bugs. All right, so now let's move on to the ones that are, these might not be big money makers anymore, but these are still fun, and they're definitely viable to make some money, but you're just not gonna be printing it. The first one that I'm gonna lead off here, I included it in the last category, but really it probably belongs here, is risky salvage. You're not getting nearly as much as you used to with it, and you're probably gonna have to start salvaging to actually make back the money that you're spending on these missions. That really does reduce how valuable these missions are, and I put them in more of the fun category than the money-making category. Next up, we've got the new Repel Raid on Orison missions. I don't know if they actually ramp up on payout or anything. I've tried a bunch of these, but generally speaking, there's just a lot of risk of being killed because of how many enemies you're usually killing in a bunch of different locations. They can spawn behind you pretty easily, and it's also pretty far distances between them. So in general, it doesn't really feel worth it, but it is a lot of fun. I mean, it's a new place. You can check out these cloud view platforms. If you liked Siege of Orison, you'll love these, but the payout just doesn't seem to be as relatable. If you haven't tried it since the update, Arena Commander is awesome. Go check it out. I mean, seriously, get better at flying, get better at fighting. No risk, you jump in, you die, you respawn, you restart, no delays. Dramatically different than in the PU, right? So if you're not used to piloting, if you're not used to FPS combat, Arena Commander is really your place to practice and get better at it. And yeah, the people that are in there are very good. They're very good, and they're going to smoke you, especially if you're a newer player, but you're going to get good faster because of it. If you were to do the same kind of training in the PU, every time you die, even if you're at a Carrack, let's say, right, and you respawn in the Carrack, you're going to respawn without weapons, you're going to respawn without a ship. That's not the case in Arena Commander. You always respawn ready to go for whatever task it is that you're doing. So definitely check out Arena Commander. It's a great way to get better. There's a bunch of different game modes. There's experimental modes to check out. Racing, Pirate Swarm. Pirate Swarm is really cool if you haven't done that. Vandal Swarm is also really cool. They're really PvE engagements, those two, Pirate Swarm and Vandal Swarm. You're going to face tons of enemies, but it's actually another great way to train as a player because you're really at a disadvantage. Like, you really are swarmed in these missions, so you have to be skilled enough to outpace these guys to be able to win. Now, while it's also available in Arena Commander, you can also check out Racing in the PU. It's a little bit higher stakes, of course, because if you blow up Racing in the PU, you restart. But once you feel like you've really got a handle on racing in Arena Commander, come into the PU and start seeing these locations in person. It's something that, I mean, talk about fun. Like, the payout is pretty negligible. It's whatever. But the fun of going to a location, trying the race, trying to beat the scores, it is so entertaining, and it's cool because you actually get to see them in the real universe. Think about like other racing games that are out there where you always spawn in at that location, you start at that race. I think Need for Speed once or twice did it where you have to actually make it to the race. But even then, you always would like magically appear in the real race and it would only be a portion of the world. This is cool because you do the race exactly where it is in the world around you. And compared to other racing games, this is actually particularly cool because not a lot of racing games have 6 degrees of freedom. You're racing not just on a, snaking path, but you're really paying attention to your roll, your yaw, your pitch. When should you boost? When shouldn't you boost around a turn? How much are you going to drift around that turn, etc. So racing is really great in Star Citizen. There's a big community. If you haven't done it, do yourself a favor, pick up an M50 or something, right? Jump in it and try some races. They're a blast. So on the legal side of salvage missions, we also have just the regular salvage mission where you can go get a claim for a big ship and basically scrape the hull. Later in the year, we do know hull munching should be coming. We don't know what it's going to really look like at this point in time, but it should be on its way. In the meantime, you've got Power Wash Simulator. So if you just want to hang out, watch a movie, those basic salvage missions are great. They're also a good way to pick up some extra components for free, as well as some weapons for free. Don't plan on selling them because they don't really sell for anything, but they're good for backups if you happen to need them. Also, because they're not attached on a ship, you can store them in like a C2, and anytime you need it, you can pull out that C2 and swap out the stuff you need to swap out. To close out this section, this isn't the last thing you can do to have fun in Star Citizen, but this is the last directed content, I would say, that I think is worth checking out personally. It would be player medical beacons. A lot of people are going to complain and say, oh, but you never know if it's a trap or whatever. Yeah, that's kind of the point. I mean, it's fun. The fun of the medical beacon is, are you helping a player or are you about to fall into a trap? And that kind of gameplay is so much more interesting than just taking on yet another NPC-based mission. If you don't like PvP, that's obviously not going to be a thing that you'll enjoy, but I do recommend you get kind of accustomed to these things and start exposing yourself to it more. I know so many people who swore up and down they were PvE only, they would never touch this stuff because it's PvP, but with a group or with a little encouragement, a little bit of training, a little exposure to it, they found out that it's actually a ton of fun. Medical beacons, in my personal experience, some people will say otherwise, but at least 80% of them are valid beacons. Pretty rare that it is a trap, and when it is a trap, it's usually pretty obvious once you get accustomed to the way that the griefers in Star Citizen act. You should be able to start sniffing that stuff out quick. A really easy way to check this, right, is if they join your party or not. If they are willing to join your party, that gives you an idea of where they are, if they're really moving or not, and other details that makes it a lot harder for them to grief you than if they're not willing. Not to say that's a foolproof method, but it is one way to check and see. Medical beacons are always some kind of an adventure. You're either going to make a friend or find an enemy. And I mean, what more do you want from an MMO experience than that? If that doesn't sound like an interesting thing, that's kind of the core of Star Citizen. So that player experience is going to be there in the future more and more, and it's going to be harder to escape. In the future, the idea is that there would be rep to help you guess if that is going to be a friendly target or not. But even that's not going to be foolproof. And so you're going to really always want to be ready for these beacons to be fights. Anyway, I'll get off my pedestal from here. Try some PvP stuff. It's fun. All right, so that's going to conclude the things I'd say are worth trying, right? So they're fun things that maybe won't make you money, but worth trying. Maybe you'll make some money, but now I'm going to talk about the stuff to avoid in 3.21.1. Now, this is stuff that I'm going to say avoid for a variety of reasons, right? It might not pay out well. I might not consider them fun, right? Fun's subjective, but to me, maybe this activity isn't fun. Or it's particularly buggy or bugged to a point that it's not really worth trying. And so this section is really stuff to just kind of avoid, especially good for new players, but returning players, I do keep this updated for the current 3.21.1 patch. So it's not about history, right? It's about this current patch, whether to avoid it or not. I want to start off with the one that I see every single new player go for right away, because it seems like such a new player friendly mission: box missions. Don't do them. Don't pick them up. Don't take them. Avoid them at all costs. Box missions are notoriously lethal. You're either going to get the box stuck to you, it's going to fall through the planet, you're not going to be able to finish it, you're going to lose rep with them. Waste of time. Avoid box missions at all costs. These I think they're under the delivery tab generally. Not worth it. Yes, they would be great if they worked, but they don't. So don't do it. Next up, I'm going to go to the PvP side of the world with player bounties. And a lot of people might not like hearing that, but player bounties in the current state of the game are just not worth pursuing at the moment. One, the prey that you're following, that you're tracking, has a god marker on it, so you'll always know exactly where they are if they're in comstat range, which is great for the bounty hunter, but also the person that has that crime stat knows that, so they're going to stay outside of com range. And that's if they're an experienced PvPer. So that means you're only going to be really going after players that have no clue what they're doing. Occasionally, it'll also be a trap where you'll show up and it's going to be like a dozen PvPers and you'll basically get beaten up, right? But most of the time, if you do happen to run into a PvP player bounty, that person's going to run immediately and you have really no ways to stop them. I say, hey, Dust, but you've got ships that can stop them, like the Sentinel or the Mantis or the Cutlass Blue. And yeah, sure, if you're absolutely perfect with those ships, you can stop a player. You can also get a crime stat yourself and immediately get a bounty assigned to yourself as well. Very easy for that to happen because those are considered aggressive acts. Right now in the game, PvP is amazing when the other player actually engages in the PvP. It really is fun. It's a ton of fun. The reason I don't recommend these is because the majority of the time, you're not going to actually be PvPing. You're going to be trying to find a player who's going to keep running away. There's really not much you can do to stop that unless you're faster than them. That then limits the ships you can take. It's not very solo friendly. You really need a group of players to be able to do this efficiently, and then the payout just isn't worth it. If this is like your cup of tea, if it's what you want to do, this goes for all these things I'm going to list in this section. Yeah, go do it. If you want to go hunt players, go for it. It's the only way you can do it right now is with these bounties. But I'm just saying that if you're trying to find new content to try, this really isn't worth it. Not in the current state of the game. Right now, it either feels cheap, like you're beating someone who never stood a chance, or it's very frustrating and the player keeps getting away and not a lot of fun area in between. The next thing I would say on the PvE side, avoid cargo hauling. It's really not worth it. Can you make money? Yeah, sure. But it's not exactly a fun or engaging loop, at least not to me. Again, if all you ever wanted to do was be a space trucker, sure, go for it. I mean, I'm not going to stop you. I'm just saying these aren't things that are worth the average player to try out if they don't have a very particularly strong interest in them, right? You can make money doing it. It's not really the best. Yeah, you can bring gold, you can do other supplies and things. But generally, I find that by the time you get your route, by the time you get everything going, the limitations on the buy-sell, which if you're not familiar, the server kind of tracks a global supply that's available at shops amongst all servers. So if server A, somebody buys out all that supply, it's not available on any of the other servers, even though you can't interact with that person on server A. So it's not really a particularly great experience. Also, demand is a thing. So like you can't sell to a place that doesn't have demand for it. And it's the same thing as the supply where you can't, if like one player drains the supply and then fills the demand, you're basically stuck with whatever you have. Can you make money? Yeah, sure. But generally speaking, I don't think most players will find this to be a fun, engaging, or fulfilling profession at this moment in time. The one exception to this is the whole sea. Avoid at all costs. It really, like, I don't care even if it's your jam. The whole sea end to end, the experience is not there yet. It's very buggy, it's very glitchy. Avoid the whole sea right now, unfortunately. You can spawn it at a docking place, you can take it out and fly around, you can use it for your own cargo to get from place to place, but I would not expect to buy and sell from a whole sea. That experience is just not fun. Next, I want to cover just a couple of more missions that players can pick up to avoid. Clear claim jumpers. This one can be very enticing for players, especially newer players. They're like, oh, it's going to be a bunch of prospectors to kill. Easy peasy. These missions almost never work. The claim jumper missions are so buggy. You'll keep getting prospector spawns. Finding the satellites can be an absolute pain if they spawn in on that server. A lot of times you'll desync, you won't see the satellite spawn in, and you can never find it. Not very fun. Another one that I see recommended, so I can see why people like it, the unauthorized surveillance detected. You go around, you blow up a couple of satellites, you move on with life. I mean, for the money, I guess if you really needed it and you don't really have any skills, sure, maybe it's worth it. But I feel like so many other things are better in this game. There's so much more interesting content available that you can make the same money or more per minute and actually have like an enticing gameplay loop. This is very dull in comparison. You're just blowing up some satellites, moving on with life. Right? I guess if that's what you want, go for it. But the payout and everything, personally, I don't see the kind of draw to it at the moment. The Zeta Perlinite, I think that's how you say it, missions. Basically, you're going to pick up some crates of Zeta P. You're on a timer. You have to get them to the location within a time. Cool. I don't know. Maybe I just don't enjoy it, but to me, they're not really that interesting. If you haven't done Xenothreat yet, the server-wide event Xenothreat, and that's coming up, I'm not saying it is right now, but I'm saying if there's an announcement for it in the future, go ahead and run these missions because they'll give you kind of like a rough feel of what to expect for that. Otherwise they're not really worth the money. I don't think the gameplay is that compelling in them. Those kind of 1/8 SU boxes have a habit of forever glitching out in your character's hands, as I mentioned for the box delivery mission, which makes them kind of a pain in the butt. The last thing I think worth mentioning here, there is that new consignment mission. I suggest avoiding that completely as well. Unfortunately, what you're going to pull out is a 1/8 SUU box, which as mentioned just now for the Zeta P missions, but also for the box delivery missions, it ends up being a major issue and completing it is just a pain. I would say try it once, have some fun with it. It's a new mission type. There's a lot of enemies that spawn, so if you need like a ton of gear or a ton of guns, that's a great way to get it for free, especially if you're a newer player for the first time. You can pick up tons of armor, pick up tons of weapons, kind of throw them all in the elevator before you go out and then walk off happy. Just don't expect to complete the missions. All right, so I think that's about everything you should avoid in 3.21.1. I've said this a lot throughout the video, but just be aware, right? You can go and do these missions. And if you enjoy them, I'm not saying don't do them. I'm just saying they generally just aren't worth it to me. So before we wrap up this video though, I do want to cover one last thing. I just want to talk about the next patch coming up, 3.22. Right now we have a couple items that are tentative in the view. I also want to cover a couple of things I think are going to be coming in as well. So right now the Q4 patch 3.22 marked tentative on the release view is the player hair update. So we got to see that at CitizenCon, pretty cool. Structural salvage, this is the hole munching. Basically you break down a ship, say you've got a Hornet in front of you, right? You'll cut off a wing and literally eat that wing. We'll be getting inventory cargo containers. These are kind of neat. They look like big open cargo containers. You can just kind of shove stuff in, and I assume they'll probably have their own grid inside of them. We'll be getting the Aopoa Centauri, a medium fighter, pretty neat. And then we'll also be getting the Origin X1, X1 Velocity, and X1 Force, which are basically like a hover vehicle, right? They'll fit, the 400i was designed to fit one of these in that front section, so that little elevator that comes down, right? That's real thin. These ships are meant for that. Or I guess the 400i was designed to hold them. I don't really think they were designed to fit the 400i. I think it was the other way. Those are the only officially announced things, but I think based on some recent comments from Jared and ISC, as well as just knowledge of CitizenCon, what we saw, I don't think it'd be a stretch to say we're going to see persistent hangars or freight elevators in Q4 in the 3.22 patch, maybe a 3.22.x patch, but almost certainly 3.22. Based on how far along they are, it really looked like they're just missing UI at this point, which of all the things is not necessarily the hardest thing for them to solve. So I think that's a realistic possible addition. Another potential thing is that we might see some more new player experience updates, new outpost locations, or additional settlements in Stanton. These are all things that are on the progress tracker currently. They're not slated to end in time, but the reason I'm thinking they might be coming in is because these are things that could, functionally speaking, if a piece of work is complete, they could easily include these into the PU without a ton of extra effort. So these are things we could see that would be nice little enrichments. The last thing I think worth mentioning, we might see an experimental mode in Arena Commander. Thorsten kind of mentioned this in the CitizenCon update, that might have an experimental mode for the engineering updates. So that might let us see the new interface, see the component health, stuff like that. Who knows how in depth it'll be. That's very possible for 3.22. Might be a stretch, but I think in the world of possibilities, right? It won't be on the progress tracker. We don't really know. It's just going to pop up suddenly. 1 week. So I think that's very realistic though for this year. I think it's something that's very near and dear to him and something he wants to get in our hands sooner than later, that we can start playing around with it and seeing what crazy things players invent with it. All right, and I think that's everything that'll be coming to 3.22, at least that I can forecast as of right now and reliably say with minimal speculation that, these are things that could be coming. Anything else is just a pure guess from here, basically. But yeah, so that's 3.21.0 and 3.21.1 in a nutshell, things to avoid, things to do, things to check out, etc. Hopefully you found this engaging engaging and relevant to what you're looking for. If there's anything you think I missed that is worth mentioning, please include it in the comments down below so other players can see that. And thank you so much for your time. Until next time, I've been Dust Cell, and this has been The Consultants. Take care.